70 years ago, a small group of British businessmen travelled to China to unlock opportunities between the two countries. They became known as the icebreakers. Meet the bridge builders, the individuals who dare to think beyond the horizon and open up our world.
I'm Wei Yang, and I was born in Beijing in 1974. My mother, she's a professor in university. My father, she's a teacher in a high school teaching Chinese. My father told me about the Chinese tradition. I was a big fan of Chinese culture. My mom, she told me more about mathematics and how we can protect the environment. I was very keen to go to Rome to study all the fascinating squares in Rome, but they didn't open degree courses for master students. So I applied Sheffield because on their brochure they said, if you like countryside, you will like Sheffield. I was keen to be a great designer, thinking about the appearance of building. But actually, from the course, I learned about how we can design buildings to consider long-term sustainability. The Garden City movement started from social reform about a century ago. Industrialization happened mainly in major cities. There were a lot of rural communities. They moved to the urban area for job opportunities, but the city had a lot of slums because the living environment was very, very poor. Some pioneers, they started to think about how we can create a new model to resolve this problem. I think there are lots of initial great principles we can use, but 21st century we have different challenges like the climate change, like the biodiversity decline, and also we have the technology change as well. I developed that further to relate to the 21st century concept, so I call it 21st century garden cities. I wrote a book called Humanistic Pure Land and the Garden Cities. It's talking about the connections between garden cities and the Buddhism philosophy, because I believe compassion is the foundation why garden city movement started in the first place. And also I believe Buddhism, which is very much a philosophy behind lots of people thinking in Chinese. So Tech City project was one of the first projects we got in London. At the time, the Tech City was a new concept, just started, and was around the Old Street roundabout. So rather than focus on the roundabout itself, we start to think about how we can develop Tech City around the Regent Canal and then make sure that's the key focus of the whole area. When I first went back to China was around 2010. Sustainable development was still a very new thing. Before China opened up, there was a huge rural population. And then because of the very fast urban development and also economic development, a lot of rural population, they moved to urban areas. The Chinese large cities were the primary focus of urban development. A lot of mega cities like Beijing, Shanghai, quite often they are based on American models. But I believe Chinese has a rich culture. China is such a vast country, different provinces, and even between different villages, the culture can be very different. But it's how we can preserve this diversity and variety is so important. In 2013, I was the co-chair of UK-China Eco-Cities and Green Building Group. I went to China quite a lot to lead trade missions and also give lectures on sustainable development. China started the National Spatial Planning Reform, I think it was around 2018, and I was one of the experts to give advice to the Chinese ministry. So my recommendation was taken by the National Spatial Planning Reform to talk about how we can integrate the beauty of nature into urban development and how we can think about the better integrated urban-rural development. The Royal Town Planning Institute was formed in 1914. I became president in 2021. I was the first Chinese-British president in the institute, and I believe I was also one of the youngest of all the presidents as well. So I was very keen to lead the planning profession, to have a revival of spirit and modernize the planning profession. I'm very keen to engage young people and also to talk about how internationally we should have a more joined-up approach. All in all, a modernized planning profession is a profession for hope and for the future. It's a faith in our ability to act together. I think there are a lot both China and the UK can learn from each other. Chinese culture is my mother culture. So I always relate what I learned in England compared to what I experienced in China. UK has been doing fantastic in terms of thinking about sustainable development and also preserve the cultural heritage, like the model of national trust. One of the China's strengths is thinking strategically and then to consolidate all the efforts together to make things done. The Chinese culture is a very open culture, so Chinese people are quite willing to adapt to new technologies, so they have a quite open mind. I think actually that mindset helped me to think about how we can modernize the garden city concept to make sure it's related to the 21st century context. For me, building bridges is a natural thing because I love both countries. I think primarily people's concerns about happiness, health, and also friendship and how to contribute to society. There are lots of similarities. I would like to see in the next 30 years there are more collaborations between two countries to see how we can tackle the grand challenges. There is no age and gender difference in our spirit, no race difference in our soul. As long as we believe in ourselves, we can all make a lasting difference for good.